We've gone from dead queen to God. I'm loving this. These are all like I'm in the past. I feel like I'm going to walk out and get hit by a bus.
As I'm aware, I think we've had the most
win
nominations and the most
wins.
awards.
Yeah, I'm sure you have. And well deserved. Thinking, the last person Nikki's going to want to see is me.
Going back to the British Hairdressing Awards, who actually makes the decision on who wins the chief award?
I got a birthday card last year from the dog. I've set up my new business and have said I'm only doing things that with nice people where I can make a difference and have some fun.
What part of your work would have surprised people the most? Welcome to season 2 of our Heads Together podcast. I'm Michael Van Clark, and today we have a very special guest, Jayne Lewis Orr, ex-Hairdressers Journal matriarch.
Matriarch. Thank you very much. I'm very much looking forward to talking to you.
Jayne, take us back to the early days and how you actually got into working with the hairdressing industry.
So I was editing the Beauty magazine, a professional a magazine for the professional beauty industry, and the opportunity came up to take Hairdressers Journal as part of the group. It was kind of you're going to do this as opposed to we'd like you to do that, but that was fine. I was up for the challenge. That was 1997. It did coincide with my honeymoon, which meant the British Hairdressing Awards took precedence over the length of my honeymoon, but that kind of set the trend, really. I think it's an industry that once you're in forever.
But you did manage to go away on honeymoon.
Oh, yeah, I did. Definitely did. Just cut it short by a couple of days. But yeah, so that I could come back and be there. Because I think if you're going to look after something and love it, you need to see it and feel it.
Because that was the British Hairdressing Awards big night, which I think is still the biggest night that Grosvenor House hold.
It is. It's still the biggest seated dinner in London, I believe. So, yeah.
And I know from when I started, it was, or in those early days, it was sort of 800, 900, 1,000, 1,200, 1,400. Yeah. Do we get permission from Westminster to go to 1,500? And then it's ended up at 1,700 and
yeah, so we do, it's usually 1,700, 1,750. We've had a couple of years where we actually had guests in the ballroom as well. So we were over 2,000.
Wow, on a live link.
On a live link, so that you'd have to move everybody through. They'd have the drinks reception, then they'd set it up for dinner. They'd have 2 courses rather than 3, but it gave teams the opportunity to bring a wider team at a slightly different ticket price to bring them to the event so they could experience it. And they had a live link up into the ballroom, so it was fun.
I know it's a mad, exciting, glamorous event.
Stressful.
But you've really got some stories from those days, haven't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's been brilliant, and I have to say you kind of grow up with it and you learn a lot pretty quickly when you're running events like that, because if you put 1,700 people in a room together, and particularly when they're passionate, vivacious, they want to win, they're excitable, anything can happen, and literally anything does happen. So yeah, it's been an absolute highlight, and I think right up until last year, which was my last one, I still got excited about being at the Grosvenor House, seeing everybody and just seeing what a difference it makes to people. So I think, while ever you still love something, you should keep doing it. But for last year was the right time for me to step back.
And there must be an instance where people perhaps went too far, got too upset, got too excited.
Yes. I mean, I think the behaviour's definitely changed over time. And I think social media's had a big part to play in that, because now you can't escape. People have got you on their phone, right? So they can see the bad behaviour. So either the bad behaviour is now more subtle and more hidden, or people have just got better behaved. But I mean, it was a riot. We had more security required than the BAFTAs had every single year. I got told by the Grosvenor House that their teams often used to volunteer to work because it was the best people watching exercise of the year. But, we've had things where where one of the British winners the next morning came down, the concierge came to bring them their car. They managed to smash their car through the bollard at the front of the hotel, causing quite considerable damage, and then finished it off by, he obviously was upset, understandably, but trying to be very calm. He'd rested the British Hairdressing of the Year trophy in the boot, and the concierge then slammed the boot and broke the trophy. And his team was saying the thing he was most worried about was telling me the trophy was broken, not there was about £6,000 worth of damage done to his car. So, yeah, there have been many things. I mean, some involving your brother, obviously. So Nicky was obviously a big...
There was some upset, wasn't there, when
Nicky.
He was preparing an entry and then didn't quite...
He didn't make the deadline.
Get there.
And I'd only had the job a matter of weeks. So And, you know, I was absolutely terrified having to make the call to say, I'm really sorry, but you're disqualified from British Hairdresser of the Year. It's not how you want to start.
No.
But it was, I think, to be fair, nobody ever in the 28 years I ran it asked me for an extension on a deadline after that. So it kind of set,
But
the parameters.
you met him after, and
oh, he was
everything was
gorgeous.
fine,
I was
sure.
really nervous. Nicky was absolutely lovely. I bumped into him in a restaurant, and actually it was with Guy Kramer, and Guy was like, "Oh, Nicky's here. Let's have a chat." And I was thinking, "Oh, the last person Nicky's going to want to see is me." And he could not have been more lovely or more charming. And I've obviously seen him many times since, and he's been an absolute superstar.
And he entered again after that.
Yeah, he did. Yeah,
And,
well, I think the brand did as well. So
yes,
yeah, it
yes.
was fine. It was fine.
And I think he won some years after that.
Yeah, he's won. I'm trying to think when he won, because we had kind of a run of where it was Nicky, Anthony Mascolo, John Frieda had won before my time.
That's right.
On the group, but Anthony won. Then it was kind of Umberto Giannini, and that kind of new next generation kind of came through. But kind of it was always still, you know, and it was similar names because they were absolutely leading the charge at that time. They were the ones with the profile. They were the ones on TV, and had that really ambassadorial role, but also phenomenally skilled hairdressers. And
Yes.
you know, I think they made hairdressing cool.
Is it you know, just the nature of the work that you can't pretend to be doing it, that you have to be fully engaged, where some forms of office work you can sort of, you know, just
Wing it.
pretend your way through and wing it.
But it's
you
personal,
can't do
isn't
that
it?
with hairdressing.
No.
You have to be fully there. You're with someone.
Well, because also I think, you know, and everyone talks about this, but hairdressers they're pretty much unpaid therapists, right? Because
As well.
everybody tells their hairdresser probably more than they tell their best friend, even their partner at times, because there's that trust. And I think what other service, apart from beauty therapy, is there where it's actually you've got your hands on somebody and there's complete trust? Because if your hair doesn't feel great, you don't feel great.
Sure.
So it's a real, you know, I think the pandemic for me was absolute proof of that. Hairdressing became the fourth emergency service, didn't it? And I think if anybody was honest, and I've said this before, you know, as much as you might have wanted to see your gran, you actually wanted to see your hairdresser more than anybody else. I mean, by the time the pandemic finished, my fringe was below my nose and the very short bob I had was down past my shoulders. And I was I cried when I went and had my hair cut with the sense of relief that I could get it done.
I get it. And I had a client who said, look, and this was during lockdown, she said, look, if I come by in the car and put my fringe out the window, would you cut it?
No.
I just thought, I mean, do you remember that? Do you remember?
Yeah.
And you
People
know,
are desperate.
another one was, look, if I come at night and we just do it in the back room with the lights off.
Oh, yeah.
And I thought, well, how am I going to see you?
Yeah. This is not going to work. It's not going to end well, is it, if I do it in the pitch black?
No, but what part of your work would have surprised people the most?
Probably the level of detail that I still did, in terms of I was still reading every page up until I left. Because if it's in you, and my training, you know, if your name is on something, whether it's as executive director or editor or deputy editor, you're only as good as the last magazine you produce. You're only as good as the last newsletter that goes out, set of awards that you run, exhibition.
Sure.
So, and, you know, big events particularly, and publishing requires that attention to detail. So I was still absolutely in the detail, reading every page. You know, I would check the programme for the British Hairdressing Awards, and I would check the guest list, because there's nothing worse than going to an event and they've not spelt your name right.
Yeah.
And I've suffered from that myself with Jayne with a Y, parent compromise. But the amount of times you turn up and it's Jayne, it doesn't bother me, but it's just that level of detail. And I think you want to show that you care and that it's important. And I just would still do, you know, British Hairdressing Awards, I'd be setting out table cards with the rest of the team. It's all hands on deck to deliver something like that. Yeah. Stuff in goodie bags at salon. You do what you need to do because you just get stuck in to deliver whatever it is that needs delivering at that time.
Yeah, I think when you're really good at what you do, it's easy for people to see the results of what you've done and not realise the amount of levels of depth and detail that's had to go into that.
No, I think people, and it, you know, I'm sure if you don't do events, they just magically happen, right? But the fact that you're there, you know, we would be there till from 6 o'clock in the mornings, and often all day on the Sunday, rehearsing and checking AV, and, you know, till quite late. Then you're there at 6 because the crew are in. I wanted to make sure I didn't have to be, but you're part of a team that's delivering something that's really important to people. Yeah. And it would be the same at salon. You know, I can remember getting a call at salon. it was about 10 to midnight. We'd had quite a long build on the Friday. Well, a very long build because it had just, there'd been a couple of stands that hadn't been, let's just say one got built back to front. So we had to turn the stand, and it was a big stand with a lot of staging, a lot of AV. So I got back to my room about 10 to midnight, and then got a call from the event manager to say, we've got a flood. And I'm like, I'm really confused. It's an indoor venue. How can it be flooded? And the water pressure had not been set right. So all the backwashes that were in locked stands started to explode. So you're then there, we're trying to get 200-300 metres of carpet relayed for the next morning, mopping up, making sure that everyone's electric's working. It
happened at night when
everybody had left. Everyone had gone. We'd locked the halls up, and they were literally just locking up and heard running water. So, you just got to go. You just got to deal with it.
Just deal with it.
Yeah, you've just got to get on with it. It's, it doesn't matter who you are, what you are. You just do whatever you need to do to deliver what needs delivering. So, and it's an experience, isn't it? It's a learning experience. It never happened again. Thank God, touch wood.
So, going back to the British Hairdressing Awards, who actually makes the decision on who wins the chief award?
The British Hairdressing. Right. So for British, that's nominated, as is Session. So you can't enter British. It's a nominated award, and it's nominated on obviously skill, ambassadorial role, flying the flag for British hairdressing, really. And that goes out to Hall of Fame. So anybody that's won an award 3 times is in the Hall of Fame. Right. And then kind of alumni, because obviously, there are some people that absolutely have a view and should be taken into consideration who are not in the Hall of Fame. So they're asked. And then a limited number of press. And they're press that know about hairdressing. Yeah. And that was one of the things I changed when I came in. For me, it's an award based on talent and skill, and it's not a popularity contest. Right. So, that back in the day, there were parties with the British pictures all around. So we made it that you can't see the British photographs. They are absolutely embargoed until the judging is finished. So you can't. So you're judging blind. So you can't say, "Oh, that's so and so's. I know who it is. I like them. I like what they do," and vote for them. You're voting for the best set of photographs as you see them. So they're nominated, and then a set of 8 images are produced exclusively for the British Hairdressing Awards. And for British, they're judged only at the second round. The other categories, apart from British and Session, were judged, and things may change this year, but I think it's still 2, are judged end of July. And then all those entries, then you get finalists, 6 finalists in each category. And then at the second round, which is September, the British and Session are judged alongside the finalists in all of the regional and specialist categories. So it's a no one from the brand judges, no one from the sponsor judges. And because obviously we know whose pictures are whose. And, it has to be and, we had auditors on site, independent auditors to collate the marks. Because it absolutely had to be fair and transparent.
Once the result has been worked out, how many people know that before it's announced?
Probably 3, 4.
So just a very tight
group. Very tight
no
group.
Leaks.
No. I mean, we've had people try and find scripts backstage and all sorts over the years. I mean, all sorts of things have happened. And then we used to have pyrotechnics. You're not allowed pyrotechnics anymore, and like confetti cannons. So, but we had to pay to rig 8 confetti cannons, because if you put one over a table, that table knows it's one, right? So you rig 8 and you waste 7 because you're never going to pull them. But 1 confetti cannon used to go off. But people would look. So they would literally get to their table and they'd be looking in the ceiling to see where the confetti cannons were. So, I mean, I get it. It's a big thing. People want to know. And the amount of times I'd get people, the night before, and they'd be like, your eyeballs aren't changing. Oh, am I going to have a good night? And I'm like, you can have a great night. So is everyone else. It's just like, so I think I mastered the art of that stoic
poker face.
Don't give anything away. So that's how it's decided. And it is absolutely fair and transparent.
Moving away for a moment, what's home life like now?
What's home life now? Well, so I have twins of 24 who I'm delighted to say still living at home, much to my delight. Both, but I think if we've taught them anything,
both boys,
2 boys. I had IVF, So there's not everyone's like, oh, twins in the family.
I know
No.
how lovely that is because I have 11-year-old twin boys.
There you go. And it's just the best thing. It's such
amazing.
A gift. Such a gift. And, you know, I think one thing I think they've probably learned is the value of hard work, because they've seen both my husband and I work hard. And so, yeah, I'm at home, and then I have my dad. My dad celebrated his 90th birthday 2 weeks ago, so we had a party for him. My dad's a professional musician, so and only stopped playing kind of at jazz things and even, you know, Ronnie Scott's just as we went into the pandemic. So and I think, like for many people, the pandemic was not good for older people because they suddenly weren't doing what they were doing for quite a long time. So a very cute little mini Dachshund who's become according to my sons, my surrogate child. One little mini Dachshund, yes.
Short hair, long hair? Short
hair, called Maisie. She's a silver dapple. She's absolutely firmly in charge of everyone in the house. The smallest thing by a country mile because they're all huge. They're all very tall, my family. So, yeah, that's kind of home. And if I'm not working, I suppose, you know, they all laugh at me, but I like baking and cooking, and I love doing all that home stuff. I love, you know, having everyone for dinner, and I'll always do Christmas for the family. Got my brother's family. You know, so we're a tight, my nieces and niece and nephew, we're a tight
That's
little
nice.
community. So, and family has always been the most important thing for me. So as much as I was working really hard, you know, if the kids needed me when they were small, they had to come first.
Yeah. Well, I mean, hard work, twin boys and lots of baking. That sounds like our house. We don't have a Dachshund, but my sister has two.
Oh, honestly,
and
best thing ever.
she's besotted with
Yeah, I
them.
am. Absolutely. To the extent that I got a birthday card last year from the dog that the boys had done that said, from your new favourite child.
Yes. Yeah, no, I can believe that.
Yeah, but she wants to sit on my knee. They're 6'4", 6'5". They don't. I get that. They're 24. She still wants to cuddle me. So she's not going anywhere. For me, this is a massive time of readjustment because, you know, I did the role, as I said, for a long time, was absolutely 150, 200% in. So, you know, in late, out late, lots of evenings, lots of weekends. So I think the family probably thought I'd be home more than I have been. But I've still been doing kind of a lot of stuff and working hard, and I enjoy it. And I think if you enjoy what you do, why would you not want to do it? Yeah. So, you know, I'm trying to get the balance. And I think when I get the balance, that will be a good day. I don't think, look, the balance has worked for me. Would other people think it's the right balance? Probably not. But I think you have to do what feels right. So it is about trying to have a bit more time so that, you know, if I want to go and see Dad or do something, we can go away. But I think I've probably failed on that. But I'm only 3 months in, so that's not too bad. So ask me again in about 6 months and I'll tell you. But you know, I've joined a gym. I'm trying to look after myself, and it's not being morbid. But you know, one of the things that made me start thinking about leaving work was, you know, in June of this year, I've outlived both my brothers and my mum. So that's quite and I'm not morbid about it. But it does change how you think. And I think life events happen to all of us, and they probably change your direction. I think if my mum had, you know, not died when I was 21, I think she wanted me to just have a family and be a mum like she was. And who knows, maybe that would have been the thing. But that wasn't meant to be. She wasn't here. And you change. Do you know what I mean? You change accordingly. Your path changes accordingly. Yeah. So for me, it genuinely is about just, you know, enjoying every second of what I do. I've set up my new business and have said I'm only doing things that with nice people where I can make a difference and have some fun. Luckily, I think 99% of the hairdressing industry is lovely. Yeah. And you would want to have a drink with them or go for lunch. You know, do you know what I mean? It's not hard work. And I think the old job was hard work, but wasn't, because I still loved what I was doing.
Yes.
So for me, a good day is being fit and healthy and, you know, being able to still do the things that I love doing. And that includes working, whether it's working, baking, or, you know, just seeing friends or, yeah.
Let's wrap it there and we will catch up on another episode.
Brilliant. Thank you.
Thank you.